This Silverback refused to eat for weeks. Who he was waiting for will make you cry. The air inside the primate holding facility hung heavy, thick with the humid, suffocating promise of an impending thunderstorm. Outside, the sky had bruised into shades of violent violet and deep, churning charcoal, casting a weak, jaundiced amber light through the reinforced skylights above. Inside, the silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic, hollow dripping of condensation from a cold steel pipe onto the damp, moss-slicked concrete floor. In the center of this dim, suffocating cavern sat a giant, reduced to a ghost of his former majesty. His name was Macaulay, a 32-year-old silverback gorilla, a creature whose very lineage was etched in the dense, impenetrable jungles of the Congo. But Macaulay was dying. He was not dying of a pervasive disease, nor was he dying of the natural decay of old age. He was dying of a broken heart. It had been 21 excruciating days since the massive ape had allowed a single morsel of food to pass his cracked, dry lips. Around his massive, slumped form lay a colorful but deeply tragic mosaic of untouched offerings. Sweet, overripe mangoes, their skins wrinkled and oozing a sugary, fermented perfume. Crisp green apples, their vibrant skins dulling in the twilight. Tender bamboo shoots, their rough, fibrous textures wilting in the stagnant, heavy heat. The smell was a thick, cloying mixture of rotting fruit, damp earth, and the sharp, acidic scent of animal grief. Macaulay's magnificent coat, once a shimmering tapestry of obsidian and spun silver that caught the sun like polished jet, had grown dull, matted, and coarse to the eye, hanging loosely over a frame that was visibly shrinking by the hour. His immense, leathery hands that could snap a mahogany branch as effortlessly as a dried twig, rested limply in his lap, the knuckles dusted with the powdery gray residue of the concrete floor. His eyes, usually pools of deep, ancient amber swirling with a terrifying and beautiful intelligence, were sunken and hollow, staring fixedly at the heavy steel door of the enclosure. He was engaged in a behavior that defied every biological imperative encoded in his ancient DNA. For an apex primate, starvation is an unthinkable violation of natural instinct. Every fiber of a wild creature is designed to survive, to consume, to endure against all odds. Yet Macaulay had consciously overridden his own evolutionary programming. He was waiting. And the tragic mystery of who he was waiting for, and the unbelievable truth behind his silent vigil, reveals a depth of emotion so profound, so devastatingly human, that it will forever alter the way you look at the animal kingdom. As we stand in the shadows of this quiet enclosure, bearing witness to a love that transcends the boundaries of species, we warmly invite you to become a part of our storytelling family. Before we delve deeper into this heart-wrenching mystery of loyalty and loss, please take a moment to gently press the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support is the lifeblood that allows us to continue bringing these incredible, true stories of the natural world into the light. We also want to deeply connect with the beating heart of our global community. Journey down into the comments section below and tell us where in the world you are watching from today and what time it is there right now. Whether you are listening under the midnight stars of a quiet European town, feeling the crisp chill of winter, or watching the morning sun break over a bustling Asian metropolis, smelling the rain on the pavement, your presence here matters to us. Now, let us step back in time, out of the darkness of the holding pen and into the vibrant, sun-drenched world where an extraordinary bond was first forged. To truly understand the crushing weight of Macaulay's self-imposed starvation, one must first feel the warmth of the world he had lost. The sanctuary, nestled deep within a lush, misty valley, was a paradise of sensory abundance. Here the air was eternally sweet, carrying the intoxicating perfume of crushed hibiscus petals, wet fern fronds, and the rich, loamy scent of ancient, sun-warmed soil. The light in the valley was a living, breathing thing, filtering down through the emerald canopy in dazzling, golden shafts that danced gracefully upon the forest floor. It was in this Eden that Macaulay had spent the last 20 years of his life, and it was here that he had formed an unbreakable, soul-deep alliance with a human named Dr. Elias Vance. Elias was the head primatologist, a man whose quiet demeanor hid a fierce, protective passion for the apes in his care. To Macaulay, Elias was not a keeper. He was a vital member of the troop, a trusted confidant, a brother born of a different mother. Their bond was not built on the simplistic transactional dynamics of food and reward, but on a complex, beautifully intricate foundation of mutual respect and shared silence. Elias smelled of peppermint soap, old sun-baked cotton, and the faint, dusty scent of weathered paperback books. A unique, comforting olfactory signature that Macaulay could detect on the wind from a mile away. When Elias entered the enclosure, the rough, fibrous texture of his faded khaki shirt was a familiar, grounding presence against Macaulay's coarse fur. They shared rituals that spoke the unspoken language of the heart. During the long, languid afternoons when the brilliant tropical sun baked the earth to a hard, cracked crust, Elias would sit beside the great Silverback in the dappled shade of a sprawling fig tree. They would not look directly at one another, a gesture of profound respect in the gorilla world, but would sit shoulder to shoulder, the fragile, peach-colored skin of the human mere inches from the dense, muscled bulk of the ape. Macaulay would occasionally reach out with a terrifyingly powerful finger, the thick black nail carefully manicured by his own teeth, and gently, with the delicate precision of a watchmaker, pick a stray leaf or a prickly burr from Elias's thinning gray hair. In return, Elias would speak to him in low, rumbling tones, a deep vibration in his chest that perfectly mirrored the contented grumbles of the troop. It was a language of shared breath, of claimed space, of a deep, resonant peace that wrapped around them like a warm, heavy blanket. Macaulay knew the exact sound of Elias's uneven gait, the specific, crunchy rhythm of his leather boots pressing into the gravel path, and the warmth of his small, fragile hands when he offered a piece of sweet, fibrous sugarcane. It was a universe built on absolute certainty, until the day that certainty violently shattered. The fracture in Macaulay's world did not occur with a gentle tearing, but with a sudden, violent severing. It happened on a Tuesday morning, a day characterized by a strangely oppressive and unsettling weather pattern. A thick, unseasonable fog had rolled into the valley off the distant mountains, swallowing the golden morning light and replacing it with a cold, damp, bone-chilling mist that clung to the skin like a wet shroud. The air smelled wrong. It was entirely stripped of its usual floral sweetness, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of ozone and the underlying sour scent of sudden human panic. On this morning, the familiar rhythm of Elias's boots on the gravel never materialized. Instead, there was a chaotic, terrifying symphony of screaming sirens in the distance, a sound that sliced through the tranquil, misty air like a jagged, rusty blade. A flurry of unfamiliar keepers rushed past Macaulay's outdoor enclosure, their faces pale, their voices tight and sharp with undisguised fear. Macaulay, sitting in the damp, silver-tipped grass, felt the frantic vibrations of their distress through the leathery soles of his feet. He smelled the unmistakable acidic scent of their adrenaline, a sharp, bitter contrast to the comforting peppermint and warm earth he was eagerly waiting for. That day, Elias did not come, nor did he come the next day or the long, silent day after that. As the hours slowly bled into days, and the days stretched agonizingly into weeks, the sanctuary transformed from a haven of peace into a cold prison of unending suspense. The secondary caretakers, desperate and filled with a mounting, suffocating sense of dread, attempted to fill the terrible void. They arrived bearing heavy buckets of Macaulay's most cherished delicacies. They offered perfectly roasted sweet potatoes, their skins blistered and caramelized, radiating a warm, earthy sweetness into the cool air. They brought armfuls of crisp, snapping celery and ripe, heavy bunches of yellow bananas. But as they tentatively approached the steel mesh, their own anxiety betrayed them. Macaulay could smell the sour, nervous sweat soaking into their collars. He could feel the frantic, disorganized, terrified energy radiating from their trembling hands. To the grieving Silverback, these vibrant offerings were nothing but ashes. The clinical deterioration of the magnificent animal became a waking, relentless nightmare for the veterinary team. Macaulay's amber eyes, once bright and keenly observant, retreated deep into the cavernous shadows of his skull. The imposing muscular crest of his head seemed to tragically deflate, and the thick, protective pads of fat along his massive shoulders melted away, leaving the sharp, brutal architecture of his skeleton pressing threateningly against his skin. The texture of his life had become entirely abrasive. The once soft grass of his outdoor enclosure now felt like needles against his thinning body, driving him into the dark, concrete isolation of the indoor holding pen. The veterinarians, monitoring him around the clock under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, were drowning in a sea of despair. They tried lacing the sweetest, thickest fruit juices with potent appetite stimulants and powerful antidepressants, the air in the prep room choking with the sterile chemical stench of medicinal iodine and crushed chalky pills. But Macaulay, with his impossibly keen evolutionary senses, would simply sniff the contaminated, unnatural liquid, curl his graying lip in a silent expression of profound sorrow, and turn his massive back to the observation glass. He was slowly, intentionally, turning off his own life force. The experts watched the flickering monitors, charting his plummeting weight and dangerously slowing heart rate. Terrified by the cold, clinical reality that they were entirely powerless against the sheer, devastating force of a broken heart. The mystery of Macaulay's absolute refusal to survive seemed utterly impenetrable, a dark, tragic riddle locked tightly behind the silent, sorrow-filled gaze of an ape. The keepers, attempting to rationalize the irrational, assumed he was merely depressed, throwing a prolonged, stubborn tantrum over the sudden disruption of his daily routine. But to reduce his immense suffering to mere behavioral frustration was a gross, almost insulting misunderstanding of the profound, almost supernatural emotional intelligence possessed by the great apes. The truth of Macaulay's condition, the agonizing why behind his deliberate self-destruction, was rooted in a revelation that would eventually bring the entire sanctuary staff to their knees in tears. It was an understanding born of a terrifying, high-stakes realization about the boundless nature of animal intuition. For weeks, the staff had whispered in the sterile, brightly lit corridors about Elias's sudden absence, their voices hushed, their faces deeply drawn. Elias had suffered a massive, catastrophic stroke right there in the sanctuary administration office on that foggy, dreadful Tuesday morning. He had been emergency airlifted to a specialized neurological unit in a city hundreds of miles away, lingering for weeks in a deep medically induced coma, hovering precariously on the fragile, razor-thin precipice between life and death. The chilling revelation came from Dr. Aris, the sanctuary's lead animal behavioral scientist, who spent a sleepless, coffee-fueled night reviewing the high-definition security footage of the enclosure from the exact morning Elias had collapsed. In the grainy, silent footage, Dr. Aris noticed something that made his blood run cold. At the exact moment Elias's brain had hemorrhaged in the office a half-mile away, Macaulay had suddenly, violently dropped the fresh bamboo shoot he was happily chewing. The massive ape had stood up fully on his hind legs, his nostrils flaring wide and violently, his massive head swiveling directly toward the administration building, completely ignoring the food at his feet. Macaulay had not just heard the distant sirens, he had sensed the catastrophic rupture in his universe before a single human had even dialed for help. Gorillas possess an olfactory bulb in their brains that is vastly more complex and sensitive than a human's, tied inextricably and permanently to the deep memory and emotional processing centers of their minds. But Macaulay's connection to Elias went far, far beyond the physical realm of scent. Macaulay was not throwing a tantrum, he was holding a sacred, spiritual vigil. The gorilla had smelled the distinct, terrifying biochemical markers of trauma and catastrophic illness clinging to the clothing of the staff who had frantically tried to resuscitate Elias before rushing down to feed the ape. He smelled the spiked cortisol, the sour tang of adrenaline, the faint, metallic scent of human panic, and the terrifying, cold odor of impending death. To Macaulay, the food offered by the panicked keepers was deeply, irrevocably contaminated with the scent of his best friend's mortality. Eating the food would be an act of betrayal. It would mean accepting the death of his brother. Macaulay had effectively, consciously, anchored his own survival to Elias's. As long as Elias was trapped in the silent, motionless, sterile void of a hospital coma, Macaulay would stubbornly join him in the darkness, allowing his own magnificent body to wither in profound, empathetic solidarity. He was utilizing the language of the heart in its most raw, devastating, and literal form, systematically stripping away his own flesh and muscle to accurately mirror the suffering of the human soul he loved. The breaking of this terrible, suffocating spell did not happen with a grand, cinematic explosion of joy, but with the quiet, unbelievably fragile return of a single, shared breath. It was the breathtaking dawn of the 22nd day. The brooding weather outside had finally, gloriously broken, washing the valley clean of its oppressive, lingering gloom. A gentle, shimmering morning mist rolled softly across the lush, dew-soaked grass, catching the early, piercing rays of the rising sun and turning the entire sanctuary into a stunning canvas of soft, glowing pastel pinks and brilliant, washed golds. The air smelled fresh, bursting with the scent of wet earth, blooming night jasmine, and the clean, sharp, intoxicating promise of a new day. Inside the holding pen, however, the weak, artificial amber light illuminated Macaulay's skeletal, broken frame. His breathing had become dangerously shallow, a faint, ragged, wet, rasping sound that echoed mournfully off the cold concrete walls. The air in the room was thick with the distinct, acidic scent of his failing kidneys, the grim, undeniable olfactory signature of a magnificent animal entering the final, irreversible stages of starvation. And then, the heavy steel door of the main corridor groaned and creaked open. The sound that followed was not the heavy, familiar thud of rubber keeper boots, but the soft, rhythmic, mechanical whir of rubber wheelchair tires on polished linoleum. The faint, metallic clinking of a portable oxygen tank accompanied the slow, agonizingly cautious turning of the wheels. Macaulay did not move at first. He was far too weak, his massive, heavy head resting lethargically on his crossed, bony arms, his eyes squeezed shut against the pain. But then, the subtle air currents in the room gently shifted. Cutting clearly through the stagnant, heavy smell of damp concrete and sickness came a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of assent. It was masked heavily by the harsh, sterile chemical odors of hospital bleach, starched linen, and sharp medicinal iodine, but beneath that synthetic, unnatural armor lay the undeniable, earthy, beautiful fragrance of peppermint soap and old cotton. Macaulay's heavy, graying eyelids fluttered. With a Herculean effort of will that caused the atrophied muscles in his broad back to visibly tremble and spasm, the great Silverback slowly lifted his massive head. There, on the other side of the heavy, unforgiving steel mesh, sat Elias. The human was a heartbreaking shadow of his former self, his skin shockingly pale and translucent, his frail body drowning in a gray, oversized hospital gown, his hands shaking violently as they gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. But his eyes, bright, tear-filled, and overflowing with an ocean of desperate, unwavering love, were locked fiercely onto Macaulay. Slowly, agonizingly, his face contorted with physical effort, Elias lifted his right hand.
The flesh was bruised deep shades of purple and yellow from endless IVs, the texture of his skin delicate like crumpled dry tissue paper. He pressed his frail, trembling palm flat against the cold, unyielding steel of the mesh. Inside the enclosure, Macaulay let out a sound that instantly tore through the hearts of every single keeper, weeping quietly as they watched on the monitors, a low, broken, vibrating whimper that sounded like the deep cracking of a subterranean tectonic plate.
Gathering the last terrifying, adrenaline-fueled reserves of his fading strength, Macaulay dragged his massive, wasting body across the abrasive floor. He reached up, extending his massive, leathery black hand, the skin as rough as ancient tree bark, and pressed it firmly against the mesh, perfectly, beautifully aligning his long fingers with Elias's. The barrier between them seemingly ceased to exist. In that suspended moment, a profound, almost magical biological synchronization undeniably occurred. As Elias, weeping silently, tears tracking down his pale cheeks, took a long, deep, shuddering breath, Macaulay's massive, hollow chest expanded in perfect, flawless unison. They exhaled together. Inhale. Exhale. The jagged, panicked, dying rhythm of the gorilla's failing heart began to noticeably slow, steadying itself to perfectly match the quiet, fragile beating of Elias's healing heart. The acidic tension in the room, the suffocating scent of death and failure, instantly evaporated, completely replaced by the overwhelming, palpable, radiant warmth of absolute relief. With his left shaking hand, Elias weakly reached into his lap, picked up a single flawless red apple, its smooth skin catching the morning light, and rolled it gently through the narrow feeding slot. Macaulay looked down at the apple, then looked deep, piercingly into Elias's wet eyes. Slowly, reverently, the great gorilla reached down, picked up the fruit, and brought it to his cracked lips. The sharp, crisp, explosive sound of the first bite echoing in the silent room was the most beautiful symphony any of them had ever heard. As Macaulay slowly, methodically chewed, the sweet, life-giving juice of the apple restoring a faint glimmer of vitality to his exhausted, sunken eyes, the profound philosophical weight of this miraculous event settled over the sanctuary like a heavy, sacred mantle. This story, unfolding in the quiet, damp isolation of an ape enclosure, entirely shatters the long-held arrogance of human exceptionalism and forces us to completely, humbly reevaluate the depth of the animal soul. For centuries, traditional science has stubbornly sought to reduce complex animal behavior to cold, mechanical equations of physical stimulus and response, framing their lives within the rigid boundaries of base survival instincts and territorial drives. We have arrogantly, selfishly reserved the noble concepts of deep, sacrificial empathy, of profound mourning, and of a love so powerful and overwhelming it actively defies the instinct to live, solely for our own species. Yet, Macaulay's silent, starving vigil challenges this outdated paradigm to its very core. He demonstrated a profound, agonizingly beautiful and undeniable manifestation of what we must call the sixth sense of love. It is a biological, emotional, and spiritual tether that completely ignores the arbitrary, human-drawn boundaries of species, genetics, and spoken language. This silverback gorilla did not just visually recognize his caretaker, he fully merged his emotional existence with him. Macaulay's stunning ability to sense Elias's catastrophic illness from afar, his incredible capacity to perfectly interpret the complex chemical signatures of trauma on the sanctuary staff, and his conscious, deliberate decision to endure excruciating physical starvation rather than abandon his spiritual connection to his human brother reveals a level of emotional intelligence that should leave us utterly humbled and eternally awestruck. It teaches us with undeniable clarity that empathy is not a uniquely human invention, but rather a universal, elemental force of nature, as real, heavy, and powerful as gravity itself. It proves that within the quiet, intensely observing minds of the creatures we share this fragile planet with, there exist vast, uncharted oceans of deep feeling, vivid memory, and profound, unshakable devotion. Macaulay and Elias's synchronized breathing across the cold steel mesh stands as a beautiful, heartbreaking monument to the absolute truth that love is the ultimate, undeniable language of the universe, incredibly capable of bridging the widest evolutionary divides and healing the deepest, most fatal wounds of the soul. The long, arduous road to physical recovery for both the broken man and the starving silverback was a deeply challenging journey they undertook together. Side by side, their already incredible bond forged in the fires of near death into something closer to unbreakable titanium. Today, if you walk through that sun-drenched, misty valley, completely surrounded by the fresh scent of crushed ferns and warm, wet soil, you will see a healed, magnificent Macaulay sitting shoulder to shoulder with Elias beneath the sprawling, shady canopy of the great fig tree, once again sharing the quiet, beautiful, spoken and unspoken language of the heart. Their remarkable story remains a glowing, undeniable beacon of hope, a powerful reminder that we are never truly alone in this chaotic world as long as we possess the incredible capacity to love across all boundaries. If this deeply emotional, life-changing journey of Macaulay and Elias has touched your spirit today, we kindly ask you to please gently press the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with someone who desperately needs a reminder of the beautiful, hidden miracles happening every day in the natural world. But before you go, we eagerly want to hear your voice. In the comments below, tell us your own story. Have you ever experienced a moment of profound, unspoken intuition or an undeniable sixth sense connection with an animal in your life? Share your heartfelt experiences with us, and until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart unconditionally receptive to the deeply unspoken languages of the beautiful, wild world all around us.